Before sunrise, long before towns fully woke, there were always people already at work. People whose lives followed the quiet rhythms of water, fabric, and early morning light. Among them were the washerwomen who gathered by the riverside, lifting heavy baskets, rinsing clothes in cold water, and filling the still air with the steady sound of washing, wringing, and patient conversation. Their work shaped the mornings of entire communities, even though their stories were rarely written down. Tonight, we're going to drift into their world, a calm, steady place where the river set the pace of the day, where early dawn light shaped routine, and where quiet cooperation turned hard work into a shared rhythm. This isn't a dramatic tale. It's a peaceful look into a forgotten part of daily medieval life, one that helped towns stay clean, organized, and connected. Before we begin, if these slow, soothing stories help you relax or fall asleep, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow and lets me keep creating calm history for you. And tell me in the comments, would you rather start your day beside a quiet river or in the heart of a waking town? Your answers always inspire new episodes. Now settle in, let your breathing slow, and let's step softly to the riverside, where the washerwomen begin their day. Long before the town's first sounds began to rise, before roosters stirred or shopkeepers unlocked their shutters, a different kind of morning routine unfolded along the river. It began in the pale blue shadow of dawn, at a time when most homes were still dark and silent. For the washerwomen, the day always started early, not because someone demanded it, but because the river offered the best light, the best water, and the best calm during those earliest hours. Their route to the riverbank was familiar and unchanging, a path walked so many times that each footstep felt like part of an old, reliable pattern. Across narrow streets, alleys paved with stone, and footpaths lined with simple wooden fences, the washerwomen carried baskets filled with clothes, linens, and fabrics gathered from homes the evening before. These baskets were heavy, but the women balanced them with practiced ease. Their movements were slow and steady, measured in a way that helped conserve energy for the long morning ahead. The quietness of dawn suited their work. The streets belonged only to them at that hour, and the gentle coolness helped ease the effort of carrying loads down to the riverside. The washerwomen did not walk in large groups. Usually, they traveled in pairs or small clusters, meeting at natural points along the way, a crossroads, a shared well, a small stone bridge, where their routes overlapped. At these meeting points, the first murmurs of conversation began. They exchanged brief greetings in calm, low voices out of respect for the sleeping households. They shared observations about the weather, the condition of the river the previous morning, or how heavy their baskets felt that day. Their conversations were not hurried. The early hour allowed them to begin the day without pressure. As they approached the riverbank, the path widened into a familiar open space. A gentle slope leading down to the water, smoothed over many years by their footsteps. The river itself flowed with a steady, reliable rhythm. It wasn't a large or powerful river, but it carried enough current to rinse fabrics clean without rushing too fast. The washerwomen knew every detail of its behavior, how the water level changed from week to week, where the shallowest stones lay, how the light reflected during each season, and which parts of the bank held firm ground even after days of rain. Upon reaching the river, the washerwomen placed their baskets in a line along the bank, creating a sense of order that made their work easier. They selected their spots with quiet precision, often choosing the same place day after day. Over time, each woman had developed an instinct for where light felt best, where stones felt most comfortable for kneeling, and where the river flowed just quickly enough to help rinse fabrics thoroughly. Before beginning their work, they took a moment to settle themselves, adjusting their sleeves, tying aprons tightly, rolling cloths into piles according to type. These small, familiar motions formed their own kind of morning ritual. Nothing was rushed. The rhythm of the river set the pace. The washerwomen understood that the best work came from steady hands, quiet patience, and attention to small details. The first significant part of their routine was sorting. Different fabrics required different handling. Heavier linens went first, set closest to the water's edge. Lighter garments were placed farther up the bank. Woolen items, which needed gentle rinsing, were placed separately. These distinctions were second nature to the washerwomen. They did not need to think consciously about them. Their hands moved automatically, guided by years of experience. Once sorting was complete, the washerwomen knelt by the river's edge, placing wooden boards or smooth stones beneath their knees. These simple supports made long hours of work far more bearable. Some women used flat boards as washing surfaces, securing them against stones to rest fabrics on. Others preferred using the riverbank's natural shape, kneeling over areas where smooth, water-worn rocks created natural platforms. The first touch of cold water on their hands marked the true beginning of their day. Even during warmer seasons, the river carried a refreshing coolness that reminded them of the hours of work ahead. They dipped cloths into the water with a practiced motion that avoided unnecessary splashing. Their movements were efficient but gentle, treating fabrics with care to prevent wear. As the washerwomen worked, the sound of water became part of the morning's natural rhythm. It wasn't loud or forceful. It was steady and continuous, weaving together the soft motions of rinsing, the gentle lapping of water against stones, and the faint rustle of cloth moving through currents. Because the town was still asleep, these were the only sounds that filled the air. For the washerwomen, this quietness was not loneliness. It was the calm before the day's real activity began. Conversation began naturally as they worked. They talked about the previous day's tasks, the families they washed for, the challenges of certain fabrics, or the subtle changes in weather. Their conversations flowed as steadily as the river, never rushed, never strained. They shared advice freely: how to treat a stubborn stain, how to reinforce thinning fabric, or how to adjust washing techniques for different types of dye. Knowledge passed from one washerwoman to another in small, meaningful exchanges. By the time the sun began to rise fully, the washerwomen were already deep into their tasks. Morning light reached the riverbank more slowly than the rest of the town. Trees along the shore cast long shadows across the water, and the haze of dawn softened every reflection. The washerwomen understood how this light behaved. They knew when it would brighten enough to make colors more visible, when shadows would shift, and when the glare on the water would appear. They timed their tasks accordingly. When the sun finally lifted high enough to brighten the river, the washerwomen often paused for a brief moment. Not to rest, though they occasionally stretched their backs, but to observe the light. The river transformed under the morning sun. Patterns of ripples became clearer. Fabrics revealed their true shades. The work area filled with a subtle warmth. This was the moment when the washerwomen moved from early-stage rinsing to the more detailed part of the process. Scrubbing came next, a calm, repetitive motion that required steady hands and even pressure. The washerwomen lifted each cloth from the river, placed it on their boards or stones, and worked through stains using simple natural materials. They did not use harsh cleaning agents. Most relied on coarse sand for abrasion, a small amount of lye from wood ash, or handfuls of soft grasses that helped lift dirt from fibers. These materials were abundant and easily replenished. Their use reflected the washerwomen's deep understanding of the natural world and the resources around them. This scrubbing stage formed the heart of their work. It required the most concentration and the most strength. The washerwomen moved in a rhythm that had been shaped by years of practice, leaning forward, pressing down, lifting, turning, and rinsing. Each stroke was purposeful. They adjusted their force depending on fabric type, condition, and age. Fine linens demanded gentle handling. Heavy cloths required firmer strokes. Delicate garments received careful, focused attention. The washerwomen knew the needs of each item without hesitation. As the sun climbed higher and the town began to wake, distant sounds started to blend into the atmosphere. The echo of a bell, the movement of carts, the low hum of early marketplace activity. These sounds did not distract the washerwomen. They remained focused on the river's steady flow, continuing their routine with the same unhurried pace that defined their mornings. The washerwomen also kept careful watch over the movement of the river. They understood how shifting water levels affected their work. When the river ran higher, rinsing became easier but scrubbing more challenging. When the river ran lower, they adjusted their positions along the bank. These small shifts, though subtle, formed an important part of their routine. To work well, the washerwomen needed to sync their movements with the river's behavior. Throughout the morning, they wrung out fabrics with slow, controlled motions, folding each cloth neatly before placing it in specific piles. Clothes washed first were laid out earlier to dry. Heavier linens waited for the strongest sunlight. Lighter garments dried quickly, and were often placed closest to the river to benefit from the breeze that flowed along the water. By the time the rest of the town was fully awake, the washerwomen had already completed the hardest part of their day. They stood occasionally to stretch, adjusting their posture and lifting their arms to release tension. Their conversation continued, still calm, still steady, still woven into the rhythm of the river. The washerwomen's early morning labor was not something most townspeople witnessed. Many never saw the careful process behind their freshly washed linens or the effort required to maintain their households. But along the riverbank, the washerwomen's routine unfolded faithfully each day, long before anyone else stepped into the morning. In this quiet world of water, cloth, and early light, the washerwomen created the foundation for the day that followed, not through loud effort, but through patience, skill, and the gentle strength of work done before the rest of the world stirred. Long before discussions about craft or technique ever reached written pages, washerwomen across generations had already perfected their own methods, tools, and gestures. Their work was built not on formal training but on experience, years of washing, rinsing, kneeling along the same riverbank, and learning the subtle differences between fabrics, seasons, and the river's changing mood. Though their tools were simple, each one served a specific purpose. And in the hands of the washerwomen, those tools became extensions of the body, helping transform heavy, soiled bundles into clean, neatly folded garments that returned brightness and order to entire households. The tools themselves were humble. The most important, perhaps, was the washing board. These boards varied in shape and material, depending on what the washerwomen had available to them or what had been passed down through families. Some boards were carved from hardwood, the surface smoothed by years of use. Others were made from softer woods, replaced seasonally as the river slowly wore them down. Many had ridges carved into them, not sharp ridges, but shallow waves that created just enough texture to help the washerwomen scrub without damaging fabric fibers. The boards were carried carefully in the washerwomen's baskets. Though they looked simple, each board held a personal connection. Some women inherited theirs from mothers or older relatives. Others shaped their own, finding a type of wood that matched the rhythm of their washing style. These boards did not last forever. River water softened them over time, and constant pressure from scrubbing created natural grooves, but they lasted long enough to become familiar companions in daily work. Closely tied to the washing board was the smooth stone, another essential tool. Many washerwomen selected a particular stone from the riverbank, one with the right weight and feel. It was not used for striking or hitting, but for helping press water through fabric and for certain types of gentle abrasion. These stones were polished naturally by the river over decades. Washerwomen chose stones that fit comfortably in the palm, that offered a steady grip, and that carried a shape allowing controlled movement over cloth. Some washerwomen kept these stones for years. Others replaced them when the river shifted stones downstream. Baskets formed another crucial part of their toolkit. Woven from willow, reed, or sturdy grasses, baskets were designed to withstand damp fabrics, heavy loads, and the daily journey to and from the river. The washerwomen lined them with cloth to prevent delicate garments from catching on rough edges. Thick handles allowed even weight distribution, making it possible to carry large bundles without straining wrists. Some baskets had lids, used particularly during cooler or windier seasons when washerwomen wished to keep clothes dry until ready to wash them. Each basket carried not just clothing but tools, small cloth bags of lye or sand, and boards tied securely to the side with rope. Among the simplest yet most important tools was a wooden paddle or stirring stick, used to help loosen dirt in fabrics soaked upstream. Soaking was the first stage of washing certain types of heavy linen or cloth. Washerwomen placed these items in large wooden tubs or directly into a still pool of the river, stirring gently to encourage the fibers to release trapped dust or soil. The paddles were plain, long, smooth pieces of wood, sometimes with one end flattened slightly. Washerwomen preferred paddles that felt light enough for long motion, but sturdy enough not to split. With slow, repeated stirring, the water darkened as dirt separated from fabric, marking the start of deeper cleaning. Another tool, though not always recognized as such, was the grass or straw brush. These brushes were bundles of thin, tough grasses tied together with twine. Washerwomen used them sparingly, mostly on fabrics that required quick abrasion without risking damage. The grasses offered a soft scraping motion, ideal for lifting dirt from fabrics like table linens or rough-spun cloth. Unlike modern brushes, these natural bundles needed no special maintenance. When worn down, washerwomen simply gathered new grasses, tied them together, and continued their work. Lye was another important material in the washerwomen's toolkit. Made by filtering water through wood ash, lye acted as a mild cleaning agent. Washerwomen used it carefully, applying small amounts to stains and working it into fabric fibers with their fingers. They knew exactly how much to use. Too much would stiffen cloth, too little would have no effect. The skill lay not in measuring with tools, but in sensing the texture of the cloth under their hands, the smell of the water, and the feel of the lye dissolving dirt. These were sensory skills learned only through long practice. The washerwomen's techniques were built on rhythm, a steady motion shaped by muscle memory. The first stage, soaking, required patience. Fabrics were submerged in cold or warm water, depending on the season and the specific garment. Washerwomen pressed each cloth beneath the surface, smoothing it flat to encourage water to pass fully through the fibers. The women moved slowly, repeatedly lifting and pressing fabrics, watching as air bubbles escaped and water filled each gap in the weave. After soaking came the first rinse. Washerwomen lifted each garment from the water, steadying it with both hands so it would not twist unevenly. They let excess water drain naturally before lowering the cloth into the river flow. The river's gentle movement pulled dirt away while the washerwomen guided the cloth through the water, moving it back and forth in long strokes. This motion was repetitive but meditative. Their hands learned the exact pressure needed, firm enough to cleanse, light enough to protect. The washerwomen then transitioned to scrubbing, the most physically demanding stage of the process. Placing fabric across their washing boards or smooth stones, they leaned forward with controlled weight. Their hands moved in carefully repeated patterns, downward strokes, circular motions, and long sweeps across the cloth. When working with delicate garments, the pressure was light. For thicker cloth, they used slower, heavier movements. The washerwomen did not rush any part of the process. They paced themselves deliberately, ensuring each garment received the attention it needed. Rinsing after scrubbing required a different kind of skill. Not all fabric rinsed the same way. Some needed long sessions in the water, where washerwomen let the current carry away soap and residue. Others required short, quick rinses to avoid over-softening fibers. Washerwomen understood each fabric type intimately. They knew which garments dried quickly and which ones needed prolonged shaking to release water. Their knowledge came not from formal instruction, but from hours spent kneeling along the riverbank, learning how each cloth behaved. Wringing was yet another technique requiring precision. Washerwomen twisted cloth carefully to avoid stretching. For larger pieces, two washerwomen often worked together, each holding an end and rotating in opposite directions until water streamed from the cloth. The movement was slow and controlled. It prevented strain on threads and allowed the garment to retain its shape. Washerwomen took pride in this stage. A well-wrung cloth dried evenly and quickly under the sun. Drying, though ending the process, contained its own set of skills. Washerwomen arranged garments across grassy banks, low bushes, ropes tied between trees, or flat stones warmed by sunlight. They placed garments in an order that made sense for the day's weather. Heavier cloth closer to the sun's direct path, lighter items positioned where breezes passed steadily. They monitored drying closely. If the breeze strengthened, they repositioned garments to prevent tangling. If clouds formed, they adjusted placements to catch any available light. Drier cloth was folded immediately to prevent dust from settling. Throughout all these tasks, the washerwomen relied not only on tools, but on subtle awareness. The temperature of the morning air, the strength of the river's current, the softness of the water, and even how fabrics felt against the fingertips after hours of work. Their skill was not loud or boastful. It was quiet, perceptive, and deeply tied to the natural world. The washerwomen learned from each other. Older women taught younger ones how to coax stubborn stains from cloth, how to protect their hands from overexposure to water, and how to balance work and rest along the riverbank. These lessons were passed down in calm conversation, often repeated day after day during shared tasks. The washerwomen valued cooperation. They knew that their morning routines were easier when everyone understood how to move efficiently, how to share tools, and how to adapt to the river's shifting behavior. Their hands bore the signs of their work, a fact they neither hid nor displayed. Skin shaped by water and fabric, palms strong from wringing, fingers sensitive enough to detect imperfections in cloth. These were their tools as much as boards and stones. The washerwomen respected their own strength, knowing it was built gradually through endless repetitive motion, not through sudden effort. Though their labor was often invisible to the rest of the town, the washerwomen took pride in the reliability of their craft. Clean linens and garments brought comfort to households, inns, and workshops. Their work supported the rhythm of domestic life in every corner of the community. And each tool they used, every board, stone, basket, paddle, and brush, played a role in sustaining that rhythm. As the morning progressed and sunlight spread across the riverbank, the washerwomen moved through each stage with consistent calm. Their hands guided the tools. Their tools guided the work. And through these simple objects and practiced motions, they maintained a quiet craft that touched countless lives, even though few ever watched it unfold. For the washerwomen, the river was more than a source of water. It was the center of their work, the quiet partner that shaped every movement of their morning. Its rhythm influenced how they washed, when they paused, and how quickly their tasks progressed. Over years of working at the riverbank, they learned to read the water with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in its presence. They understood that the river changed with seasons, with rainfall, with the position of the sun, and even with the temperature of the morning air. To anyone else, the river might have looked the same from day to day, but to the washerwomen, it was as expressive as a living guide. The first thing they noticed each morning was the water level. In early spring, when rainfall filled the river, the current ran faster and reached higher along the banks. The washerwomen approached with caution during these times, adjusting their positions so the flow did not disrupt their washing boards or sweep away cloth that needed rinsing. They chose slightly elevated spots where the stones were firmly set and where their baskets remained safely out of the water. In late summer, by contrast, the river often ran lower, exposing smooth rocks and wider stretches of shallow water. These conditions allowed the women to spread out more comfortably, moving closer to the center of the river's flow for the best rinsing motion. They read the river not through measuring tools, but through instinct, the sound of its movement, the way it reflected early light, the slight tug it made on fabric when submerged. A quicker pull meant they needed stronger grip. A gentle movement meant the water would carry away dirt without requiring as much effort. This understanding formed the foundation of their routine. The second factor in their daily work was the clarity of the water. On clear mornings, when the sky reflected softly on the river's surface, the washerwomen could see every stone and every ripple beneath the surface. They preferred these days for washing delicate fabrics, as clear water made it easier to avoid snagging cloth on unseen rocks. When the river was cloudier, often after rainfall or in early mornings before the sediment settled, they worked with a different rhythm, relying more on touch than sight. Despite these small variations, the washerwomen trusted the river to provide the same essential support each day. Coolness to refresh the fabric movement, to rinse it clean, and a place wide enough to accommodate all who gathered along its banks. The river, in turn, shaped the washerwomen's posture, their pace, and their practical decisions. When to soak, when to scrub, when to rinse, and when to lay out cloth to dry. Light played an equally important role. The washerwomen began in dim conditions before sunrise, a time when shadows from trees and the faint haze of morning softened the riverbank. This early dimness shaped the structure of their tasks. Initial rinsing and soaking were done before the light strengthened, because those stages relied more on water movement than visibility. The more detailed part of their work, scrubbing, checking stains, ensuring that colors remained even, waited for better light. As the sun climbed slowly over the horizon, the washerwomen watched for the moment when the river's surface brightened. The first sparkle of sunlight on the water was more than a pleasant sight. It was a signal. This was when fabrics revealed their true tones, allowing the washerwomen to identify spots that needed extra attention. Light striking the surface also made ripples clear, helping the women determine where the current would move cloth most efficiently. The transition from dawn to full morning created a natural pause in their routine, a moment when hands slowed, back straightened, and quiet murmurs drifted through the air as they observed how the day would unfold. The washerwomen also paid attention to the angle of sunlight. In early spring, when the sun rose lower on the horizon, shadows stayed longer across the bank, encouraging the women to stay closer to the water's edge. In late summer, the sun rose higher and more quickly, casting strong light onto their boards. These differences influenced where they placed their tools, whether closer to the slope, under a tree's scattered shade, or nearer the water. Light shaped the rhythm of their eyes, their hands, and the order in which they completed each part of the process. Time itself moved differently for the washerwomen. Their sense of morning did not come from mechanical clocks. Those were rare and often inaccurate. Instead, time was measured through the rising brightness of the sky, the temperature of the water, the movement of shadows across the bank, and the gradual sound of the town waking behind them. They listened for the first bell of the day echoing faintly from the town center. They heard the distant clatter of carts as merchants began preparing their stalls. These sounds did not interrupt their work. They served as markers, helping them understand how much of the morning had passed and how much remained. The washerwomen's rhythm also depended on the sequence of tasks they needed to complete. Some mornings involved more heavy linens than usual, tablecloths, bedding, woolen capes, and these required longer soaking and stronger scrubbing. Other mornings were filled with lighter garments, children's clothes, simple shirts, scarves, allowing for a smoother, quicker routine. The washerwomen anticipated these differences before reaching the river, simply by feeling the weight of their baskets or remembering the households they had collected from. Each woman knew her own pace well. Some worked steadily and slowly, thriving in a measured, unhurried approach. Others preferred bursts of focused energy, completing difficult tasks early and saving quieter work, wringing, folding, arranging for later. Despite their individual rhythms, all washerwomen followed the same general flow. Rinse first, scrub next, rinse again, wring carefully, then lay out the fabric to dry. This familiar sequence structured their mornings and made the riverbank feel like an organized workspace without strict rules. Several natural cues helped the washerwomen coordinate their movements. The first breeze from the river always initiated the drying stage. As soon as they felt a steady wind, they began placing lighter garments on bushes or ropes. When the breeze grew stronger, they adjusted heavier linens, ensuring they dried evenly. If the wind paused, they paused. If it returned, they continued. The washerwomen did not force nature, they matched it. Birds also influenced the rhythm of their work. Early morning birdsong signaled the start of sunlit hours. Silence from birds indicated that heat might be rising soon. Washerwomen listened to these cues as they worked, using them to anticipate small changes in temperature, wind, or light. The river's rhythm affected their conversations too. When the water ran quietly, they spoke more softly, matching the calm. When the current grew louder, their voices rose slightly, not to shout, but to stay connected across the gentle noise. These conversations were not idle chatter. They were a form of pacing. Talking helped them keep their motions steady, prevented fatigue, and created a sense of companionship that made long hours feel shorter. Sometimes, there were brief pauses in their routine, a moment to rest their hands, stretch their backs, or stand and let the morning air cool their skin. These pauses were taken without guilt. The washerwomen understood that their strength had to be managed carefully, especially during mornings filled with heavy cloth. They respected their own bodies as much as they respected their work. One of the most distinctive aspects of their rhythm was the way the washerwomen synchronized their labor without planning to. When one woman shifted from scrubbing to rinsing, another nearby often did the same within minutes. When someone rose to wring out cloth, others followed soon after. These patterns were not coordinated intentionally. They emerged naturally from years of working side by side. Over time, their routines began to blend into a single shared motion, a quiet choreography shaped by necessity and habit. The washerwomen's understanding of the river also included an awareness of seasonal changes. In spring, melting snow from distant hills raised the water level, creating stronger currents. The women responded by placing their boards higher and lifting cloth more often from the flow. In summer, low water revealed new stones and shallower areas, giving the women different angles to work with. In autumn, fallen leaves sometimes gathered along the bank, creating brief obstacles that the washerwomen cleared with gentle motions. In winter, the cold made washing more challenging, But the washerwomen still came, often working faster, staying closer together, and preparing warm foods to share during breaks. Through all these variations, the river remained reliable. It might run lower or faster, clearer or cloudier, colder or warmer, but it always offered what the washerwomen needed most: a place where the morning could unfold with purpose, structure, and calm. The washerwomen's rhythm was not just physical, it was emotional and communal. The riverbank became a space where responsibilities felt shared, where women supported one another, and where the simple routine of washing created a sense of stability. Even on difficult mornings, when baskets were heavy or weather unpredictable, the washerwomen found comfort in the predictable flow of water and the steady companionship of others who understood the work intimately. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the washerwomen often stepped back from the river, hands weary but minds calm. They looked across the drying fabrics, clean, bright, neatly arranged, and felt the quiet satisfaction of a morning's labor well done. The river had shaped their work, and they, in turn, had shaped the rhythm of the riverbank. Although the washerwomen arrived at the riverbank carrying baskets filled with heavy linens, one thing they never carried alone was the sense of community that grew naturally from their shared work. Morning after morning, year after year, the same familiar faces gathered in the same small stretch of riverbank. Through seasons, changing weather, and shifting household needs, the washerwomen developed a silent but deep trust in one another. A connection built not from dramatic events, but from countless small moments of cooperation, conversation, and shared purpose. Their community did not rely on formal structure. There were no official leaders, no assigned roles, no rigid rules. Instead, the washerwomen operated through unspoken understanding. Newcomers learned simply by standing among older workers, watching their movements, listening to their instructions, and absorbing their rhythm. Those who had washed at the river for decades guided without giving orders. They taught by example: how to set up a washing board, how to position tools to prevent them from slipping, how to kneel without straining the knees, and how to manage the day's work without exhausting one's strength before midday. These exchanges were gentle and practical. A younger washerwoman might ask quietly for advice, and an older woman would respond just as quietly, showing the technique with her hands. Guidance flowed naturally. There was no competition among them. Every washerwoman understood that the work ahead was long, repetitive, and demanding, and that the riverbank became a smoother, calmer place when everyone cooperated. Conversations formed the backbone of their daily camaraderie. The washerwomen's voices, steady and low, drifted along the water just as evenly as the river flowed. Their discussions were rarely hurried. They moved from topic to topic at a pace that matched their hands. Many talked about families, children learning new tasks, aging relatives needing care, or plans for upcoming gatherings. Others spoke about the rhythm of the household work they took on after leaving the river. The washerwomen often discussed practical matters: how much lye remained in their stores, the best places to collect fresh grasses for brushes, or how certain fabrics behaved after repeated washing. These conversations created a sense of gentle continuity. Even if topics varied from one morning to the next, the sound of their voices remained constant. Women who had worked side by side for years could tell what part of the morning it was simply by the tone of their conversations. Early in the morning, their voices were soft, blending with the dim light. As the sun rose and their tasks became more demanding, the conversations grew more lively. Later in the morning, as fatigue settled subtly in their arms, their voices softened again, returning to a calm murmur that marked the approach of midday. There were moments of silence, too, long stretches when the only sounds came from the river, the soft movement of fabric, or the occasional call of a bird overhead. These silences were not uncomfortable. They served as quiet spaces in which the washerwomen focused fully on their work. Their shared silence felt like part of their connection, an understanding that sometimes calm attention spoke louder than words. Because the washerwomen gathered so early in the day, they became witnesses to small transformations along the riverbank that most townspeople never saw. They watched the first rays of sunlight touch the water in spring, saw how leaves slowly unfurled on trees in early summer, and noticed when the first cool breeze of autumn arrived. They observed changes in the river's flow long before others realized it had shifted. Such awareness created a subtle bond between them and the landscape. It also became part of their collective memory, a memory shared in quiet remarks, such as "the river ran lower last year," or "this part of the bank used to be easier to stand on." When one washerwoman needed help, whether lifting a particularly heavy cloth, adjusting a washing board, or managing a large bundle brought from a busy household, others offered assistance without hesitation. There was no expectation of payment or return favor. Helping one another ensured that the morning routine remained smooth and that no one fell behind enough to rush. Rushing, after all, created tension, and tension disrupted the peaceful flow that the washerwomen valued greatly. Their cooperation also extended to arranging the riverbank. If a newcomer accidentally placed tools too close to another's workspace, older washerwomen kindly guided her to adjust the placement. If someone needed more room during a busy morning, others shifted slightly to give her space. This respectful awareness prevented conflicts and encouraged an atmosphere where everyone felt included. Some washerwomen brought small food items to share: pieces of bread, fruit picked at dawn, or warm broth carried in clay jars. Sharing these items became part of their morning routine, especially during colder seasons when warmth was needed. In winter, the washerwomen often gathered closely during breaks, forming a small circle away from the river's cold edge. They warmed their hands on clay jars, exchanged stories, and allowed their bodies to rest before returning to their boards. Friendships developed in this space differed from friendships formed elsewhere in town. The riverbank created a sense of equality. Whether a washerwoman worked for a wealthy household or a modest one, whether she was older or younger, experienced or new, the work itself shaped their relationship. They judged each other not by social standing, but by patience, consistency, and willingness to contribute to the riverbank's calm order. Many washerwomen passed their knowledge down to daughters, nieces, or younger women from neighboring homes. These younger women, joining the riverbank for the first time, often arrived shyly, unsure of where to place their tools or how to pace their movements. But the older washerwomen welcomed them with quiet encouragement. They pointed out the best stones to kneel beside, demonstrated how to grip cloth without tightening the hands too much, and offered advice on how to avoid fatigue. These gestures reflected a continuity of tradition. Each new washerwoman carried forward the work of those before her, adapting it to her own strength and rhythm while respecting the techniques that had shaped generations of labor. This ongoing transfer of skill ensured that the riverbank maintained its sense of identity over time. Occasionally, small celebrations took place along the riverbank. They were never elaborate. The washerwomen preferred simplicity, but they marked meaningful moments: the start of a new season, the return of a washerwoman after illness, or the completion of a particularly demanding set of tasks. During these small gatherings, the washerwomen brought simple treats or warm drinks, shared laughter, and recalled small memories from past mornings. In these moments, the riverbank felt less like a workplace and more like a small community woven from shared routine. The relationships among the washerwomen also extended beyond the riverbank into the town. They recognized one another in markets, greeted each other warmly in passing, and offered help whenever needed. If a washerwoman was unable to work on a particular day, her companions often took on some of her load, ensuring that the household she served remained cared for. This informal support system provided a stability that many washerwomen relied on. Their work was physically demanding, and knowing they had companions who understood their routine brought comfort. Even the river itself felt like part of their community. Over years of work, the washerwomen shared memories tied to the landscape. A favorite stone shaped perfectly for scrubbing, a spot where the current moved just right, a tree that offered shade in the hottest months. When changes occurred, a tree falling after a storm, a stone shifting position, they noted these changes with the same familiarity that a person might show toward an old friend's home. Their presence shaped the riverbank in return. Paths became smoother where their feet passed daily. Stones grew polished from years of scrubbing. Certain areas flattened from the weight of kneeling. The washerwomen created these subtle marks unknowingly, leaving behind traces of their work without carving or building anything. These traces served as silent reminders of their routine long after they had packed their baskets and walked home. One of the most meaningful aspects of their community was its constancy. The washerwomen arrived each day regardless of small changes in weather, regardless of festivals or events in town, regardless of how much work awaited them in their households. Their dependability meant that the riverbank always began its day with the same quiet structure. Even during challenging seasons, early frost, late rains, or days when the river ran unexpectedly strong, the washerwomen gathered, adapted, and continued their work with calm determination. This consistency gave them a sense of resilience. While many parts of medieval life were unpredictable, harvests, trade, seasonal shifts, the river and their companionship offered stability. Their routine became a foundation that anchored their days, providing comfort through repetition and familiarity. The washerwomen's bond was not loud or outwardly celebrated. It unfolded naturally, built on shared labor, quiet conversation, and the simple act of working side by side. In an era where many tasks depended on collaboration, the washerwomen demonstrated how a group could create harmony through attentiveness and mutual respect. By the time the sun had risen fully, warming the riverbank and brightening the garments set out to dry, the washerwomen's sense of community had already played its part. Their cooperation made the morning smooth. Their conversations made the hours feel lighter. Their willingness to help one another ensured that no task became unmanageable. Through all these moments, the shared laughter, the shared silence, the shared work, the washerwomen formed a world of their own at the water's edge, a world defined not by its difficulty, but by its calm, dependable, and deeply human connection. When the washerwomen completed the hardest parts of washing, soaking, scrubbing, rinsing, and wringing, their work was far from over. The final stage of their morning routine, though quieter and less physically demanding, required just as much care and attention. This stage was the process of drying, folding, and preparing each garment or linen for its return to households across the town. It was a slow, deliberate art, shaped by the river's breeze, the angle of the sun, and the washerwomen's deep understanding of how different fabrics behaved as they dried under open air. Drying began as soon as enough morning light reached the riverbank to warm the ground. The washerwomen watched carefully for this moment. They did not rely solely on the sun. They relied on the combination of air movement, warmth, and open space. A strong breeze, even with modest sunlight, dried fabrics quickly. On still days, they positioned garments where sunlight was strongest. They adjusted constantly, reading the environment the way farmers read soil or shepherds read terrain. This attention came naturally after years of working beside the river. The first step was laying out lighter garments. These items, shirts, scarves, small linens, children's clothes, dried fastest, so washerwomen placed them in positions where they could catch the wind easily. They spread them across bushes, flat stones, or ropes tied between trees. When the riverbank was wide and grassy, they laid garments directly on sunlit patches of grass, smoothing each one to avoid wrinkles. They checked the ground first to ensure it was dry enough not to cling to fabric. If the riverbank was still damp from morning dew, they used stones to elevate corners slightly, allowing air to pass beneath. Heavier items, such as thick tablecloths or large woolen pieces, required stronger sunlight. Washerwomen often positioned these items along fences or on low-lying branches that could support weight without bending. On certain days, when sunlight was diffuse and shadows long, the washerwomen used both sun and wind in combination, draping heavy cloths so that their edges fluttered gently. This motion encouraged water to escape the fibers more quickly. The washerwomen paid close attention to how they arranged each garment. A cloth laid out unevenly could dry with creases that were difficult to remove later. A garment positioned in too much shade could remain damp long after others had dried. They examined each fabric by its thickness, texture, and how it felt. Some fabrics stiffened when exposed to strong sunlight, others softened. Some absorbed moisture slowly, others released it quickly. Their judgment guided where each piece went, almost as though directing a quiet pattern across the riverbank. As drying began, the washerwomen returned to check each garment frequently. They lifted edges to test how much moisture remained. They smoothed wrinkles with their palms. They adjusted positions to keep up with changing wind patterns. This was not fidgeting. It was an essential part of ensuring that clothes returned home in excellent condition. Washerwomen understood that a well-dried garment lasted longer, held its shape better, and gave households a sense of freshness when worn. During warm seasons, drying progressed quickly. The washerwomen could complete this stage smoothly without much worry about time. But in cooler or cloudier weather, Their task required careful timing. A sudden shift in wind direction could slow drying. Cloud cover could dim sunlight for long stretches. The washerwomen compensated for these changes by rotating garments, moving some closer to the riverbank, placing others nearer to open ground, or flipping them periodically to ensure even drying. They worked patiently, aware that rushing this process could undo hours of earlier effort. While drying took place, the washerwomen prepared new bundles, reorganized their baskets, and used the brief pause in intensive labor to rest their hands. They stretched their fingers, relaxed their shoulders, or stood for a moment simply to feel the breeze. These pauses were small, but necessary. The washerwomen rarely rested during the earlier parts of the morning, and this stage allowed them to recover just enough energy before beginning the meticulous work of folding. Folding was an art in itself. It began only when garments were fully dry, not slightly damp, not nearly finished, but completely ready. Washerwomen checked this through touch. The fabric had to feel warm and soft to the hands, free from coolness at the edges or dampness in thicker areas. Their fingertips were so attuned to fabric that they could detect remaining moisture long before others could. Once satisfied, they carried each item to a clean, flat area, often a smooth rock, a wooden board, or a patch of dry grass. They folded linens with precision, smoothing every crease with care. Large items were folded multiple times to create compact shapes that fit neatly into baskets. Smaller garments required gentler handling, especially children's clothes, which tended to lose their shape easily. Washerwomen folded them carefully, creating small stacks arranged by household, size, or type. Every washerwoman had her own preferred method of folding, passed down through family or learned from years beside the river. Some folded garments into perfect rectangles, others shaped them into narrower bundles. But all shared one principle: the presentation of the clothes mattered. Cleanliness was visible not only in the washed fabric, but in how it returned home. A neatly folded garment conveyed the washerwoman's respect for her work and for the household she served. Before placing folded garments into their baskets, the washerwomen often aired them briefly one more time, holding them against the breeze to release any last trace of humidity. Some added small touches, shaking the fabric lightly to soften it or brushing off stray bits of grass that might have settled during drying. These gestures ensured that nothing interfered with the freshness of the clean garments. Washerwomen arranged clothes in their baskets according to how they would be delivered. Heavier items went at the bottom to prevent crushing delicate garments. Light linens were placed near the top. Fabrics that needed to remain especially smooth were laid flat against the basket's back edge. Some washerwomen wrapped garments in clean cloths before placing them inside, protecting them from dust along the journey home. Others separated bundles with woven mats or spare aprons. Every washerwoman took care to maintain the freshness of the clean clothes until the moment of delivery. As the washerwomen worked, the riverbank transformed. The earlier sound of scrubbing and splashing gave way to a quieter atmosphere, filled with soft rustling as garments caught the breeze. The women's silhouettes moved calmly between drying fabrics, adjusting corners, folding, or inspecting cloth. The river continued flowing steadily, providing a peaceful soundtrack to the final stage of their labor. Conversations during this stage softened again. Washing was done, and the exhaustion of hard labor had eased. The washerwomen talked about small, pleasant things: the progress of someone's garden, a child learning a new household skill, or the arrival of a relative from another town. Their voices drifted lightly across the riverbank, blending with the gentle sound of leaves and water. Once a washerwoman finished preparing her basket, she checked everything one last time. It was common for her to look over each garment twice, inspecting seams, ensuring folds were tight, confirming that nothing had been left behind on the stones or grass. Even after years of work, these final checks remained important. It wasn't about perfection for its own sake. It was about sending back clothes that felt cared for, refreshed, and ready to be used again. Over time, the washerwomen developed routines for carrying baskets home. Some made multiple trips if their baskets were especially full. Others arranged deliveries along familiar routes, stopping at nearby homes first before making their way to more distant streets. The walk home was slower than the walk to the river, not because the washerwomen were tired, though they were, but because the clean garments required steady movement. They held their baskets level, taking care to avoid sudden shifts that might disturb neat folds. On the way back through town, people sometimes saw the washerwomen carrying well-packed baskets. Some greeted them with appreciation. Others simply nodded respectfully, knowing the washerwomen had been working since before dawn. Although their labor was quiet and often unseen, its results shaped the comfort of daily life for everyone in the community. For the washerwomen themselves, the journey home brought a sense of completion. The hardest part of the day had passed, yet their satisfaction did not come from finishing quickly or enduring difficulty, but from performing slow, thoughtful work that brought order and cleanliness to the town. They returned home with tired arms but peaceful minds, knowing that tomorrow they would gather again by the river, ready to repeat a rhythm as old as the community itself. Drying, folding, and preparing clothes may have seemed simple to an outside observer, but to the washerwomen, it was the culmination of everything they valued: care, patience, cooperation, and a deep respect for the small details that made their work meaningful. And through this quiet art, the riverbank became a place not just of labor, but of transformation, where the wet weight of morning gave way to the warm, sun-dried calm of midday. By the time the washerwomen finished drying, folding, and stacking the last garments in their baskets, the town had already settled into its late morning rhythm. Market vendors called out soft greetings to one another as they arranged goods. Children hurried along narrow streets carrying messages or helping with early tasks. Shopkeepers stepped out to sweep doorsteps or adjust shutters. The washerwomen stepped into this atmosphere with calm, steady movements, carrying baskets that now felt completely different from the heavy, damp loads they had brought at dawn. These baskets were lighter now, filled with neatly folded clothes that carried the clean scent of river water, sun, and morning breeze. The journey home marked the final stage of the washerwomen's work, one that required as much care as washing itself. Each basket represented numerous households, families relying on the washerwomen not only for cleanliness, but for the comfort and order that clean clothing brought into their daily routines. The washerwomen understood how much people depended on their work, but their approach to delivery was never hurried. This final stage was about steadiness, precision, and the quiet fulfillment of responsibility. They began their return from the riverbank in small groups, walking paths they had taken countless times. Each washerwoman followed a slightly different route depending on the household she served. These paths wound through sloping streets, past wooden fences, alongside workshops, and through shaded courtyards. Some delivery routes led uphill, where wealthier families lived in larger homes with wider courtyards. Others moved across flatter streets lined with simpler houses and small shops. Although the washerwomen carried similar loads, their routes differed in length and pace. Some needed to deliver to many households in a compact area, while others traveled longer distances between homes. Regardless of the route, washerwomen handled their baskets with practiced balance. They held them steady with both hands, turning corners carefully to prevent folded linens from shifting. Years of routine had strengthened their arms, allowing them to walk long distances without strain. But more importantly, they developed instinctive rhythms. The way they tilted the basket on inclines, the way they shifted weight from one shoulder to the other during brief rests, the way they adjusted their steps to avoid bumping the basket against stone walls or market stalls. The washerwomen's presence in town was familiar and respected. People knew exactly who they were and what they carried, and they greeted them with warm nods or simple words of appreciation. Families understood that the washerwomen had been at work since before daylight. Shopkeepers paused their tasks briefly to step aside and give washerwomen extra space when the streets grew narrow. Children observed them with quiet admiration, especially when they recognized garments belonging to their own households within the baskets. Though washerwomen typically avoided unnecessary conversation during deliveries, partly due to their focus on maintaining balance and partly because deliveries were meant to be efficient, they exchanged polite remarks with those they passed. A grocer might comment on the warm weather and how quickly fabrics dried that morning. A baker might offer a small bit of bread as thanks for consistent work. The washerwomen responded modestly, never lingering long, but always with a calm, friendly demeanor. Upon reaching each household, washerwomen delivered garments according to long-established arrangements. Some families requested that clothing be left on wooden benches in front of their homes. Others preferred washerwomen to hang garments neatly on pegs by the entryway. Wealthier households sometimes had dedicated laundry rooms or sheltered areas near the back courtyard. But regardless of the setting, washerwomen performed their deliveries with the same level of care, placing garments evenly, smoothing folds, and ensuring each item remained protected from dust or wind. Household members welcomed washerwomen with appreciation. Many families relied on them not only for practical reasons, but because washerwomen ensured that clothes were kept in excellent condition for much longer than they might have been otherwise. In a time when each garment held value, far beyond mere aesthetics, washerwomen played an essential role in preserving the fabric of daily life. Their work extended the lifespan of linens, maintained hygiene, and created a sense of order in homes that relied on their consistency. Some households offered small tokens of gratitude: fruit, leftover bread, a cup of warm drink, or occasionally a few extra coins when the washerwomen had handled an unusually large load. Washerwomen never expected such gestures, but they accepted them with modest appreciation. Their relationship with households was based on quiet trust rather than negotiation. Families trusted washerwomen not only to clean, but to treat their belongings with respect. Washerwomen trusted families to value the hours of labor that went into each delivery. Despite the washerwomen's work being both physically demanding and central to community life, they maintained a humble presence. They greeted households with steady voices, never imposing themselves. Even in wealthier homes, where servants might take deliveries on behalf of the family, washerwomen observed the same respectful calmness. They placed garments carefully, confirmed that everything was arranged properly, and then quietly moved on to the next home. One of the defining aspects of washerwomen's delivery routines was their attention to organization. Many carried small cloth lists tucked into their baskets, noting which items belonged to which household. Others memorized the contents of each load, relying on instinctive recognition of fabrics, patterns, or stitching. Garments were grouped in a way that made each delivery efficient. Heavier bundles at the bottom for larger homes, smaller stacks near the top for easier access. This system allowed washerwomen to navigate their routes smoothly without needing to reorganize contents on the street. Each washerwoman also developed a personal rhythm for when to take short rests. Delivery routes were long, and streets varied in steepness. Washerwomen rested by leaning their baskets carefully on low walls, stone steps, or wooden barriers. These rests were brief, just enough to ease their arms before continuing. They often used these moments to observe the town around them. Children running errands, elders seated outside their homes, artisans beginning their work, and merchants preparing their stalls. The washerwomen saw the town at its most active, catching brief glimpses of daily life that they contributed to but rarely participated in during these hours. Their role in the community went beyond practical labor. Washerwomen often became quiet observers of town life, noticing changes before others did. They saw when new families moved in, when households expanded, when repairs were made, and when seasons shifted. Because their routes took them through many corners of the town, they developed a unique familiarity with the entire community. Their knowledge wasn't used for gossip. It simply deepened their understanding of the households they served. After delivering garments to the last household on their route, washerwomen began their own journey home. Though the morning's labor had been long and tiring, the return walk carried a sense of completion. Their baskets now light, their arms free from strain, they walked with slower steps, letting their posture relax little by little. Some washerwomen took the scenic path home, passing through quiet gardens or along small canals to enjoy a brief moment of calm before beginning their household duties. Others preferred shorter routes, eager to rest or prepare for the remainder of the day. The washerwomen's work did not end once they returned home. Many had families of their own to care for, meals to prepare, and domestic tasks waiting for them. But even as they shifted from one responsibility to another, the calm rhythm of the riverbank stayed with them. The morning had been steady and purposeful, and its quiet structure anchored them throughout the remainder of the day. Their connection to the households they served extended beyond simple transaction. Washerwomen became trusted figures in the community, reliable, skilled, and attentive. Their work touched nearly every home, shaping daily routines and maintaining a sense of order and cleanliness that people often overlooked but always appreciated. Each delivery, though small in isolation, contributed to the larger rhythm of the town. Clean garments allowed families to begin their day with comfort. Inns welcomed travelers with fresh linens prepared by washerwomen's hands. Workshops functioned smoothly with clean aprons and cloths. And children ran through streets wearing clothing that had been cared for with quiet patience and skill. As the washerwomen completed their morning routes and returned home, the river continued flowing behind them, ready to welcome them again the next morning, ready to begin another cycle of the quiet, essential work that held the town together in ways more profound than any written record would capture. For washerwomen, the river was not only a place of daily labor. It was a landscape whose character shifted continuously through the year. The river in spring behaved differently from the river in summer. The river in autumn was not the same river as in winter. Each season pulled its own thread through the washerwomen's routines, shaping how they arranged their mornings, how quickly garments dried, and how their bodies moved through the work. Over decades of washing at the water's edge, the washerwomen learned these rhythms intimately, adjusting their techniques in ways that felt so natural that outsiders rarely noticed the subtle expertise behind each change. Spring brought the first major shift of the year, ushering in a time when the river ran faster and fuller from melting snow in distant hills. The washerwomen welcomed this season, though it came with challenges. The stronger current made rinsing more efficient, sweeping away dirt and lye with remarkable speed. But the higher water level required caution. The washerwomen approached the riverbank carefully, selecting stones that remained stable under rising water. They positioned their boards farther from the immediate edge, ensuring that the flow would not soak their tools or loosen fabrics. Spring air carried a chill during the early mornings, often colder than expected despite the season's reputation for renewal. The washerwomen dressed in layers, removing shawls or outer garments as sunlight warmed the riverbank. Their hands numbed quickly during the first touches of cold spring water, but the sensation passed as they settled into their routine. Spring mornings were filled with lively birdsong, creating a pleasant background as the washerwomen scrubbed cloths and lifted garments into the quick-flowing current. Spring also brought a sense of freshness to the work. Newly grown grasses appeared along the riverbank, perfect for weaving fresh brushes. Trees extended new leaves overhead, casting soft, moving shadows that changed the quality of light throughout the morning. The washerwomen observed these changes with gentle appreciation. Even in the simplicity of their tasks, they understood that spring carried the promise of smoother work ahead after the long endurance of winter. Summer transformed the riverbank into a place of warmth and brightness. During these months, the washerwomen often arrived even earlier than usual, not because they needed more time, but because they preferred to complete their heavier labor before the heat intensified. The river ran lower in summer, and its slower current required more manual effort during rinsing. Washerwomen sometimes shifted deeper into the stream to find flowing sections that would help lift dirt away. Summer light was strong enough to reveal every detail of fabric. The washerwomen inspected garments with greater ease, spotting faint stains or threads that needed extra care. Drying was noticeably faster, thanks to long hours of sunlight and steady breezes that traveled along the river. Clothes laid out on flat stones heated quickly, warming under the sun until the women could fold them with little delay. In summer, the riverbank was busier. Children played near its edges after household chores were done. Fishermen passed by carrying early catches. Travelers stopped to rest in the shade of overhanging trees. Although the washerwomen remained focused on their work, they enjoyed this livelier atmosphere. It reminded them of how deeply the river connected to the rhythms of everyone's life. Yet summer held its own challenges. Hot days required careful pacing. Washerwomen carried water to drink, placed shawls over their heads for shade, and occasionally soaked their feet in the river during short rests. They also protected fabrics from insects and dust carried by dry winds. These precautions showed that even in summer, the easiest season for drying, the washerwomen needed attentiveness more than ever. Autumn marked a gradual slowing. The river cooled, and its flow sometimes increased after seasonal rains. The washerwomen noticed shifts in color before anyone else. Leaves turning along the riverbank, grasses drying, and early morning mist drifting across the water. Their routines shifted gently with the season. They dressed in thicker garments, keeping shawls on longer, and worked slightly closer together to share warmth when breezes grew sharp. Autumn brought unpredictable weather. Some mornings were mild and calm, while others arrived with gusts that sent ripples across the river. Washerwomen checked the sky more frequently during this time, watching cloud movement to gauge whether drying would be slow or steady. When overcast days arrived, they adapted by wringing garments more thoroughly, laying them in tighter folds to retain warmth, or positioning clothes in areas where sunlight occasionally broke through clouds. This season also signaled the gathering of natural materials needed for their tools: fresh grasses for brushes, smooth sticks for stirring, and fallen branches to support drying lines. Washerwomen worked with an awareness that winter lay just ahead, and they prepared quietly for the coming cold. Winter brought the most noticeable transformation. The riverbank, usually alive with sound and movement, grew quieter under frost. Mornings began in deep cold, and the washerwomen moved carefully over hardened ground. They dressed in multiple layers, covering their hands as long as possible before the work required direct contact with water. Their breaths formed soft clouds in the early light. The river itself changed character in winter. Some mornings, thin sheets of ice formed along the edges, forcing washerwomen to break through or move to areas where water still flowed. The cold limited how long they could keep their hands submerged, so the washerwomen adjusted by working in shorter intervals, switching tasks more frequently, and leaning on shared rhythm to maintain efficiency without rushing. Their boards chilled quickly in winter air. They rubbed them with cloth before placing garments on top to prevent stiffness in delicate fabrics. Winter drying required patience. Sunlight was weak, and breezes lacked the warm pull that helped lift moisture. On many winter days, washerwomen hung garments near sheltered areas to protect them from frost. They monitored fabrics constantly, ensuring items did not freeze before drying progress could continue. They sometimes carried partly dried garments home to be finished indoors near hearths, a practice accepted during the coldest months. Despite the challenges of winter, washerwomen faced the season with the same steady resilience they brought to every morning along the river. They understood that winter work demanded calm endurance, not haste. It was the season in which their experience shone most clearly, the season when every small adjustment reflected years of learning. Although each season changed the washerwomen's routine, one thing remained constant: their connection to the river and to one another. The year unfolded in a long circle of shifting weather, and through each phase, the washerwomen adapted without complaint. Their knowledge of the river's behavior in each season formed a quiet expertise that required no formal recognition. They knew where the river would run lowest, where ice would first appear, where summer breezes struck strongest, and where autumn rains collected. These seasonal adaptations also strengthened their bond with the landscape. The washerwomen became silent witnesses to subtle yearly cycles: the blooming of the first spring flowers along the river, the deepening blue of the summer sky, the gold leaves of autumn falling gently onto drying linens, and the quiet of winter mornings when the world felt still under frost. They remembered these patterns and passed them down as part of their craft. Life at the riverbank was never static. The washerwomen moved with the seasons naturally, as if the river and air guided their steps. Their hands learned when to work quickly and when to move slowly. Their eyes learned to read the sunlight, wind, and water levels. Their routines expanded and contracted with the year's changing rhythm, creating a silent partnership between their work and the world around them. In a time long before modern conveniences, the washerwomen relied entirely on this relationship. The river shaped their labor, and they shaped their understanding of the river. Together, they created a yearly rhythm that held the town in its quiet cycle: fresh linens in spring, brightly dried garments in summer, evenly folded fabrics in autumn, and carefully tended clothes through winter. By adapting gracefully to the seasons, the washerwomen not only sustained their craft, they preserved a way of life tied inseparably to nature's rhythm. And as the year turned again toward spring, they would once more gather before dawn at the river's edge, ready to begin another cycle of labor shaped by water, light, and the steady pulse of the seasons. In many ways, the washerwomen lived at the quiet edge of the community. Their work unfolded in the early morning while most households still slept, and by the time the town reached its busiest hours, the washerwomen had already completed the hardest part of their labor and moved into deliveries or home tasks. Because of this, many townspeople rarely saw the washerwomen's full routine. They saw only the starting point, baskets filled with soiled clothes, and the ending point, neatly folded garments returned to their doorsteps. The hours in between, where real labor happened, flowed unseen. Yet the washerwomen's work shaped nearly every corner of the town's rhythm, often more deeply than people realized. To understand how much their presence mattered, one only had to imagine a day without them. In households across the town, laundry accumulated quickly. Families owned only a limited number of garments, and linens were used repeatedly until they required washing. Without washerwomen, families would have spent large portions of each week handling washing themselves, scrubbing, rinsing, drying, and folding without the ease or efficiency that washerwomen brought through years of experience. This would have slowed other essential tasks: cleaning, cooking, repairs, childcare, and work outside the home. The washerwomen's early morning presence freed households to focus on everything else that kept life running. Their influence extended into the marketplace. Clean cloths, aprons, and garments made merchants appear more presentable and professional. Vendors selling food or fabrics looked more trustworthy to customers when wearing fresh, well-kept clothing. Craftsmen needed clean aprons for their workshops. Blacksmiths, carpenters, tailors, potters. A stained garment gave the impression of disorder, whereas a clean one reflected pride in their craft. Washerwomen maintained this quiet foundation of order. The townspeople never announced their gratitude, but they felt the impact of the washerwomen's work daily. Inns and guest houses depended on washerwomen more than anyone. Travelers judged inns not only by the food and warmth offered, but by the freshness of their linens. With washerwomen preparing clean bedcloths, towels, and table linens, inns gained reputations for comfort. Travelers carried these impressions from town to town, unwittingly spreading the influence of washerwomen throughout regions. Although few inns publicly acknowledged this quiet partnership, innkeepers developed long-standing working relationships with washerwomen. They knew which washerwoman to call when expecting a group of visitors, which one managed the most precise folds for bedding, and who could manage urgent washing without compromising quality. Even community events depended on the washerwomen's steady work. Celebrations, harvest gatherings, feast days, and weddings required clean garments and fresh linens. Town halls needed tablecloths. Outdoor gatherings needed cloth draped over seating areas. Washerwomen played an invisible role in these events by ensuring everything felt fresh and orderly. Without their early morning presence along the riverbank, the appearance and smoothness of such gatherings would have suffered. Despite these contributions, washerwomen were rarely mentioned in formal records. Chronicles noted merchants, craftsmen, builders, and officials, but the quiet labor of washerwomen remained outside the written history of the town. Their work was considered too routine, too ordinary to record, even though it touched every household. The washerwomen themselves did not expect recognition. Their satisfaction came from the rhythm of the work, the time spent by the river, and the knowledge that their hands brought calm order to the community. Because their labor happened so early in the day, washerwomen witnessed a version of the town that few others did. They saw the sky before sunrise, the faint glow reflecting on rooftops, and the quiet stillness of streets. They heard the first signs of morning, birds beginning to stir, distant bells chiming, doors opening as early vendors emerged. They understood the town in its transitional state, from silence to activity. This gave them a unique relationship with the community. They lived between worlds, the calm, isolated world of the riverbank and the lively, interconnected world of town life. Their journey from the river into these bustling streets marked the moment when the washerwomen's work shifted from hidden to visible. As they carried baskets through town, they became part of the morning flow. People saw them then, noticed their presence, and sometimes offered small greetings. But even at these moments, few realized how much of the day the washerwomen had already lived. By late morning, when families were just beginning their chores, washerwomen had finished their own most demanding work. By midday, when workshops hummed with activity, the washerwomen had already shaped the foundation of comfort in many homes. One of the most striking aspects of their role was their ability to sustain continuity. Their presence smoothed transitions between seasons, between busy days and calmer ones, between households of different sizes and social standings. No matter what challenges arose, bad weather, unexpected events, or changes in the town, washerwomen adapted. Their early routines kept the town's atmosphere predictable. Even when other systems faltered, the regularity of the washerwomen brought a sense of stability. Their involvement reached deeper into family life than many understood. Washerwomen noticed when a household's linens increased, perhaps indicating a growing family. They noticed when garments grew worn, suggesting that a household might be facing economic challenges. They saw which garments belonged to children, which belonged to elders, which were used for work, and which for special occasions. They developed a quiet familiarity with families across the town, learning their needs, preferences, and habits without intrusive questions. This knowledge helped them organize washing efficiently, anticipate seasonal changes, and plan their time. Additionally, washerwomen contributed to general health and cleanliness in subtle but important ways. Clean garments reduced illness and discomfort. Freshly washed linens improved sleep. Cloth scrubbed properly prevented pests from settling in fibers. The washerwomen's work inadvertently supported the entire town's well-being, even though no manuals or records ever credited them for it. Their hands preserved fabric integrity, extended the life of clothing, and prevented households from falling into neglect. They also supported one another in these tasks. When one washerwoman faced personal difficulties, a sick child, a challenging season, or a heavier workload, others stepped in quietly to help. This mutual support ensured that the town never felt the absence of a washerwoman's contribution. Their communal mindset served not only themselves, but the entire community. Cooperation protected the reliability of their work, and this reliability sustained the households who depended on them. The respect washerwomen gained was subtle but genuine. Townspeople trusted them with their most personal belongings: the garments worn closest to the body, the linens used by children, the cloths that carried family histories. This trust created a connection deeper than most daily interactions. Even though washerwomen rarely spoke of this, they felt it. It shaped the seriousness with which they approached their craft. They understood that each garment represented a family's comfort, dignity, and routine. Their work also influenced the rhythm of other professions. Tailors depended on washerwomen to return garments clean and ready for mending. Hospitals or care centers relied on them for linens free from stains or odors. Artisans who traveled often entrusted washerwomen with their clothing, knowing it would be ready upon their return. Even the clergy, who held social influence, relied on washerwomen to maintain garments used during important ceremonies. Though washerwomen never stepped into these roles themselves, they helped sustain them through a quiet chain of support. Although washerwomen rarely received public recognition, they built their own kind of pride, not the pride of display or praise, but the deeper satisfaction that comes from knowing that one's work truly matters. They saw this reflected in the town's movement, in families wearing fresh garments, in children playing in clothes made soft through their rinsing, in tables covered with carefully folded linens during gatherings. This satisfaction gave washerwomen a sense of purpose that carried them through long mornings and seasonal hardships. The washerwomen's influence did not begin and end with garments. It extended into the atmosphere of the community itself. Their early morning presence by the river created a stable heartbeat for the town. Their careful organization of work mirrored the town's own need for order. Their consistency softened the rough edges of medieval life, offering predictability in a world that could be unpredictable. They contributed to the comfort of homes, the functioning of businesses, the gatherings of families, and the reputation of inns, all through repetitive, careful motions carried out before most people woke. In this way, washerwomen held a unique place in the unseen framework of the community. They worked in silence, without demanding acknowledgement, yet their efforts touched every street and every household. Their hands shaped the daily life of the town more than any document recorded. And even though history often forgot them, the town itself, its routines, its cleanliness, its comfort, remembered their contributions every single day. Thank you for spending this quiet time with the washerwomen by the river, the women whose early mornings shaped the comfort, order, and rhythm of an entire town. Their work may have unfolded far from the public eye, but their patience, skill, and steady hands touched every household in ways few ever realized. If tonight's slow story helped you unwind or taught you something new about the quiet strength behind everyday life in the past, I'd love to hear which part stayed with you. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. If these calm journeys into overlooked corners of history help you relax or fall asleep, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It truly supports the channel and ensures you won't miss the next gentle chapter of forgotten history. Rest well, and I'll see you again in the next peaceful story from the past.